Hello, and welcome to the kickoff talk for the Improvising the Network residency. We're here today to learn about the two incredible projects that were selected for the residency, h0t Club and Dilate Ensemble. I'm Julie Phelps. I'm the Artistic and Executive Director of CounterPulse, and we are hosting this residency in partnership with ThoughtWorks Arts. I'm streaming to you from Yelamu, unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land, also known as San Francisco. CounterPulse is located in the Tenderloin district, and we are particularly grateful for the piece of land that holds our building and our home for making arts and cultural events. And we're grateful to the stewards past, present, and future who will hold that land for arts and culture events into perpetuity. We're in the process of purchasing that building. We're also thankful for the virtual space that we're able to share today. So today's talk, in addition to being the kickoff for the Improvising the Network residency, is also part of the CounterPulse Festival, a 10-day gathering of live performance events, online events, talks, panels, and sort of mixers and socials to ask, how do we want to be together? What is the future of the live performing arts field? And, what do we do to build and reemerge a future that suits our needs of care and community better? So for today's event, it's going to be pretty simple. You're going to learn a little bit about the residency itself and some of the core concepts behind it, as well as the partners, CounterPulse and ThoughtWorks Arts. And then we'll hear from both artistic teams about their concepts and projects here at the outset of the residency. CounterPulse is an organization that's been around for 30 years. We've iterated through a different structure and different buildings in that period of time, but we've always been committed to supporting interdisciplinary arts at the intersection of social activism, relevance, body-based performance, and liveness. So we have a 10,000 square foot building that you can see behind me here in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco that we're in the process of purchasing. And part of that is building up the infrastructure, the built environment that we believe can help artists experiment and take risks and expand their practices. So we're just really thrilled to be working with ThoughtWorks Arts on this and these two incredible teams.
I'll just say a few words about ThoughtWorks Arts. It's been fascinating and really great to work with CounterPulse on this residency opportunity. ThoughtWorks Arts is a global technology research lab which incubates artist collaborations with technologists. And our theme, overriding through everything is that we investigate the impacts of emerging technologies on industry, culture, and society. It's run by myself and Dr. Alan Pullman, who's also on the call and who will speak in a moment. This program, ThoughtWorks Arts, is embedded as a part of ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks is a global technology consultancy, approaching around 10,000 employees at this point, but we're very much spread. It's a very global company. And it's a really unique company. It has like a fascinating cultural identity, which is very different from the standard in the tech world and any other tech company I've worked at. And it really has that woven into its core. When I say unique, I mean to the extent that ThoughtWorks funds ThoughtWorks Arts to be led by artists, but also it's integrated into the company with these regular ongoing collaborations between technologists and artists. We're really looking forward to welcoming h0t Club and Dilate Ensemble into their residency, which begins in a few weeks.
One of the things that became very apparent during the pandemic were issues of who's running these networks, Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, who's the content moderation and what was allowed and what wasn't allowed. And a lot of artists were finding that their own work was copyrighted, even though it was their work, and they couldn't be streamed lifetime because it had a copyright and they would be shut out. So we ran a very quick event which worked with Electron in Estonia, building a network that was artist owned and artist run. And we got very inspired by that idea. It was sort of put together for performance of something called Dance Demic with Battery Dance Company. And we realized, hey, artists can take back the network. They can do this. And so with that idea, we put out an open call. One of the primary components of the open call is that it works with a customized server instead of just you turn on the computer and you're in. And so with that customized server, almost anything is possible as long as you have a high-speed backbone connection. So when we put out the open call, that was our understanding behind it all. How can artists take back the network? So Kevin, why don't you talk a little bit about the network, just a tiny bit, because CounterPulse is building their network starting with this residency.
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin, I'm the technical director at CounterPulse. We have installed an AT&T gigabit up and down fiber network within our building, there for perpetuity. And this is really exciting because it just really allows for a lot of possibility. The computer that we are directly hooking up to it is a laptop with a Xeon processor, and we're just totally excited to see what will come of it.
I just wanted to say a little bit about the improvisation part of the title of the residency. And this emerged out of the conversations that Andy and Ellen and Kevin and I were having when we first connected around what's the interesting opportunity, much to what Andy was saying around not just, and also Ellen, like not just doing what we know can be done, but how can we move past that and why make a residency like this? And improvisation just has been really present for me in my own artistic practice. And in particular, over the last 20 months of the pandemic, it's moved sort of from the studio and from art practice into kind of being, mechanized and utilized and put into the toolbox of daily life to just sort of find ways to iterate and move through rapid change, but to not only just survive that, but to actually create within that space. So we got interested in improvisation in general across artistic discipline, but also CounterPulse itself as a sort of cultural community has a really strong history of improvised dance. Contact improvisation is one of them, but also many different types of improvised dance. And we saw that just as we see the building as this asset, as well as this sort of physical server, we also saw an asset of this residency being that cultural community of CounterPulse that has this practice, a deep-seated and personal body-based practice of improvisation. And we wanted to ask, what can we learn from body-based improvisation as we build servers and machines and create some kind of conversation that we haven't yet had. So I'm excited to see what that conversation emerges and what connections can be made there. And it could take the form of really traditionally like bringing in improvised dancers into the networked environment in some way to create artworks. But I also hope that it involves also just more of a conceptual level and integration of improvisation, and especially body-based improvisation, into how the network gets used in ways that we can't imagine quite yet. So that's the residency and the partners behind it. Now I'm going to turn it over to the projects that we've selected to take part in this residency. And first we are going to hear from the Dilate Ensemble.
Hi everybody, my name is Carole Kim. I am a visual artist who's based in Southern California. And we are Dilate Ensemble. We're an audio-visual group who met online. And in fact, to date, there's only 2 of us who have ever met in person only recently in Vienna. And so in pursuit of this project, we will actually be meeting each other and working in person together for the first time. So that right there is going to be huge as to what that means. So I think we'll start off by just sort of going around to the group so you can put face to name to what each person does. And then I'll talk about the visual side of things, giving a little bit of background leading up to the work we do together. And then I put together a short video excerpt of the pieces Dilate Ensemble has made so far. And then I'm going to pass the baton to Scott, who is our command central of, converging all the sound and what have you, and how that happens. And then lastly, we'll talk about some of the ideas that are percolating as to what we'll do during the residency. So, Dilate, introduce yourselves.
My name is Luisa Muhr, and I'm the vocalist, vocal arts person in the group. And so also for this project, my own background is I'm an artist, and I'm mostly focused on working with the voice and movement. These are my 2 main mediums. So for the first time now, we'll also get to work with movement, which is very exciting through this residency. And so, yeah, this is me. I'm originally from Austria, but I'm based in New York City, I should say.
Okay, I'm Gloria Damijan. I'm also from Austria, and I'm still in Austria, in Vienna. I play toy piano in the Dilate Ensemble. Originally, I came from piano. I studied piano, and somehow through the connections to John Cage, I got to know his music at music universities, contemporary music courses. I came to the toy piano and more into experimental improvised music. And yeah, I also do a lot of graphic notation myself when I work with other ensembles. And that's also how I'm linked to Carole's visuals, because I feel also a deep understanding, because I do visual art myself, and it's nice to have this interconnection also from the other side. And yeah, some other kind of link is between me and Luisa. This summer we met the first time in person, and we did, of course, performances. And I also personally do a lot of movement, capoeira Angola, and working with Luisa and also integrating movement. Yeah, is something we will now bring in the residency.
My name is Jon Raskin. I was a founding member of the Rova Saxophone Quartet. We've been together for 45 years now, and I got involved in making music on the internet at the beginning of the pandemic, with being a member of the Now Nets Laboratory ensemble, which was kind of created by Sarah Weaver to see how they could improve the infrastructure and the software for telematic music, as it was called. And that's how Dilate came out of a smaller grouping out of that ensemble. And so we've presented, we've created about 4 or 5 works now that we've finished up and presented online in different formats, and are looking forward to this residency to really push the envelope of what we can actually create. And I'm happy to be working at CounterPulse, where have presented different musical events over the years, and really appreciate their community, outreach and what they've been able to accomplish.
And I'm Scott Miller, and I'm a composer and electronic music performer, improviser. The vast majority of the work I've been doing for the past 20 years is, I guess, in the general category of interactive electroacoustic music, but especially using an approach to programming called ecosystemic programming that models the behavior of independent objects and agents in an ecosystem. And so for me, a year and a half ago, the challenge I had to confront immediately was, how do I take these networks of sound that typically involve being in one giant space with lots of speakers and microphones and different sound making people and objects, and figure out how to do it using the internet. And here we are. So I too am excited, and I'm not from Austria, but I have visited, and it's a lovely place. I can't wait to go back.
Okay, Kevin. So bringing it back to the visuals, I'm going to pop through these images fairly quickly, but I wanted to give a little bit of background before you end up underneath my kitchen table, which is where we've worked. So just prior to the pandemic, I was in the forests in Norway projecting there. I was a resident in Descanso Gardens and mounted several multimedia performances there, projecting onto the trees. I worked with dancers, trying to think of how the body could interact with the trees in the gardens, and worked with other visual artists. I create layered video installations when I'm not out in the landscape and using different translucent materials. And the installation was brought to life during the closing, also working with dancers. For many years, I've dismantled the cinematic screen and brought all different kinds of materials to work with the physics of light and image onto these screens that bleed through many different layers that create this very spatial kind of environment. So through collaging, cutting, and sewing, and then ultimately projecting through these layers so that it creates its own sense of sort of a cloud particle spatial relationship to the projected light. So that you could take over an entire venue that extends to the back of the stage through multiple layers. This was at Fort Mason up in San Francisco with a performance I did with Pamela Z. So that you are completely immersed in it in not a virtual space and not like a, Van Gogh, ceiling floor kind of way, but through this translucency, you are part of those layers. So another mode of working that I would do is I'd be given a specific site, such as the dressing rooms in the LA Opera, and I'd be working with a full team of 25 performers, activating every little niche of those dressing rooms. So this would be a 4-hour durational performance that would just improvise its way and evolve over the course of the evening. Working with musicians, vocalists, visual artists, film artists, and dancers. So just to give a flavor of where I'm coming from. And then we land in the pandemic and I end up in a cardboard box. Most online rehearsals and performances would happen at anywhere from 8 a.m. to noon West Coast time. So I needed a black box. And so my black box started there. And then I went from the box to the space beneath my kitchen table. And it's from there that I've been performing with Dilate Ensemble and other groups during the entire pandemic. So if we could switch to the video, each little clip that I put together is preceded by what was under my table. So you could see how it translated. Even in miniaturizing what I do, it didn't take away from the complexity of the installations that I do on a much larger scale.
beyond the true, increased beyond the true. Someone must have knocked it away.
So Scott, I don't know if you'd like to speak a little bit about how it all comes together.
Yeah, if I can share the screen. Well, I think it bears repeating that all of those excerpts that you just saw and heard are all performed in real time, live, and that's frankly, to me, it's amazing that we're able to do it. From the sound side of things, we're located in 5 distinct locations. Carole's in LA. Jon is adjacent to San Francisco. Louisa's in Brooklyn. Gloria's in Austria, and I'm near Minneapolis. And we're, our initial connection is using this software called Netty McNetface. And there's somebody present who could probably talk about it in much greater detail than I ever could. So I won't even try. Suffice it to say, it has been for us, and we experimented with a lot of different kinds of approaches, including multiple Skype and Zoom sessions and Jack Trip at the same time to get audio to connect and yet be isolated, so we could make recordings and do real-time digital signal processing of sound. And Netty McNetface is the solution that we were looking for. It sets up these peer-to-peer connections between everybody with my local DAW, Pro Tools, and then Carole is monitoring what we're doing via Netty, and then at the same time she's sending us video information that comes back to my local DAW. And when it gets to me, I'm taking all of the audio information from each performer, and I'm sending it out to another machine where I'm using something called Kima to do my real-time processing, and that comes back then into Pro Tools, where I create a mix that everybody is able to monitor, but I also create a separate broadcast mix where I'm actually syncing the audio with the video that Carole is sending. And we've even gotten to the point now of where we're sending the audio to Carole, and she is tracking that to generate the visual data. And so there's this wonderful giant ecosystem of information, both audio and visual, that eventually ends up in 2 basic outputs. One is for if we're performing live, we've so far mostly been presenting, depending on the venue, either on Facebook or YouTube or Zoom. And we're also, I'm tracking all of this and then we edit and do post-processing and mixing and produce a finished product, which is what you were watching and listening to.
For this project, we're dealing, of course, with all the what ifs and what are we going to be facing, and trying to be flexible and creative and be able to go wherever we're able to go. One, we're scaling up, right? So we're coming out from under my kitchen table and we're getting larger so that it can actually include the body and it can include architecture. And so that's a big deal. And it can include our bodies that will actually meet in person. So, you know, that's big right there. Secondly, I've been playing with, we have the sound happening as it was just described as Scott, where everything's very spontaneous and we can closely monitor each other really well. So now I would like to bring people in virtually into my visuals. And so I've been experimenting with meeting with visual artists and dancers in a live drawing session together. And this was from my session with Luisa the other day. So I'm drawing live, Luisa's seeing that, and her body is entering my drawing. And then I'm really interested in exploring the entire building of CounterPulse and maybe ThoughtWorks, we'll see, and engaging with the little niches, the little details, and how the body moves and interacts in those details. Or like the renovation of CounterPulse, it seems like there was already an awareness of wall is membrane, when one wall on one side echoes on the other side, or the staircase of a ceiling is the bleachers of the theater. And so work with the membranes of the building. So this is my first just dive into engaging with CounterPulse. So this is based on the windows that are in the upstairs studio. So I built a scrim beneath my table and I'm rear projecting onto it just as an initial investigation. So we can cycle through this, Kevin. So I like grabbing from the physical world and re-representing it and recombining it to make a whole nother world, and then how the body can enter that world and how live presence and a performative exchange can happen within those worlds. So here you have Luisa's body revealing that installation. So these are the initial forays anyway. I'm going up next week for a site visit, and then as partial ensemble will be there in November, just experimenting and seeing where we can take it. So, okay, take it away. Next group.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dilate Ensemble. That was really amazing to see, and those slides of the upstairs studio are incredible. You're already so hard at work. Yeah, I don't have anything more to say here in the intermission, but so we'll just move right over to Hot Club.
Thank you so much, Dilate. That's so exciting to see. We are Hot Club. Yay! Short and sweet. Hi, thanks so much for having us. We're thrilled to be here with you all. Hot Club is a psychedelic consumer-driven company of artists, technologists, and music makers performing the internet and beyond, building bespoke performance systems and open source technologies with a mixture of vaporwave and agitprop aesthetics. Hot Club compresses and compiles through coding in new software platforms, theater and guitar solos, Mozilla hubs, tubes of toothpaste, Valerie bots, and more in the original 3D technology live performance. We began as a company together at Brown Grad School over 7 years ago, and our work has been featured at Culture Hub, Ars Nova, Culture Project, JACC, Branoff Center for the Arts, Opera San Diego, and more. We recently received a grant from Opera Hack via Opera America and Opera San Diego to develop our prototype software Open Show with Miller Puckette, and we are going to dive into that further in a moment, as it's going to be part of our residency with ThoughtWorks Arts and CounterPulse. We're excited to collaborate with CounterPulse and ThoughtWorks to continue work on our piece, freeicecream.net, which explores our entanglements with surveillance infrastructures and information technologies via human and non-human agents in a networked environment. We can't wait to work with dancer choreographers from CounterPulse to realize the theatrical possibility of human and body agency in this piece, as well as network agency, as Ellen was mentioning earlier. I'll now pass the mic to Miller, and I'm Kate Bergstrom. I use she and they pronouns. I'm a theater director and creator by trade, and I'm on Matinacock land in Sunnyside, Queens. Miller?
Hello all, and I'm going to attempt to share screen. I'm just going to give you my whole desktop for a moment. So what I'm going to talk about is the technological side of the h0t Club project, Free Ice Cream. And this started out as an opera project, which it very much is not, but the three of us met as part of the Opera Hack project in San Diego in person about 2 years ago. And we came up with a project that was based on the idea of being in person together. But the chief insight I think I would like to share is that the business of doing real-time digital art has always been a question of streaming information from one thing to another. And for instance, in an opera house, such as the Met, well, I don't know, you have a 7-story building and you have people doing things related to the production in all sorts of different corners of it, having to be tightly networked together. So any large-scale opera or theater performance is in fact already a networked performance at some level. So at any rate, COVID hit while we were working on our project, and so we simply reconfigured our project to be something we could do during the current moment. And what we originally set out to do was make an automation package for or automation software for helping people control shows, do show control for operas and theater and dance productions. So what we ended up doing instead of that was making OpenShow a thing that allows us to experiment with networked performance, because that's what we found ourselves doing. And there's nothing really new to any of us about networked performance. I've been doing that on and off since '97. But the interesting thing is that it actually shares fundamental concepts with the software substrate that you need to do electronic real-time arts in the first place, which is this idea of you have different things going on that are having to share information with each other in real time, and the information itself is constantly changing dynamically, but the basic setup of the connections is often relatively static. In other words, you have a sort of a network that you set up of things that you want to have operate, a tape recorder, a light, a synthesizer, whatever it might be, and then you have connections between them. So in this particular case, the demo that I'm about to show you, which is not what we're going to do now, but which is an earlier project, which was basically a test of a scene from the opera Wozzeck, right? Has a singer, Jonathan Nussbaum, singing in San Diego. An audio stream, which is going over Quacktrip, is running to me. I'm about 20 miles away from Jonathan, and I'm running a score follower, which is a thing which tries to detect from Jonathan singing where he is in the score in real time. And then me, I'm sending the position in the score, which is a live stream of real-time information, to Todd Anderson in New York, part of h0t Club, who is running the main OpenShow program in his computer, which is sending lighting controls back to Jonathan Nussbaum's bedroom, where he is singing his heart out. And I have to apologize to Jonathan. I'm not going to be able to represent him terribly well, but what I'll do is in a moment try to show you a little bit of what came out of that. First, though, I want to just emphasize the similarity really between this kind of a situation and situations that are simply local. So here's a very simple example that I show students at UCSD of something you can do that marries in some sense control and audio. So now what you see is I'm just making a very stupid, simple animation, which is a bird sitting on a twig, right? And the beak of the bird is moving whenever, as a continuous function of the audio that I'm sending to it from my microphone here as I'm speaking in my room, right? So this is being managed by the program Pure Data, which which is like the somewhat better known program Max, but is more, in my opinion, advanced. And Pure Data simply allows you to have objects that do various kinds of things that you connect with relatively static connections, and it's in a network like that. And these objects, in this particular case, are all in the same place. They're all in my computer. But the point I want to make is that is in some respects the same situation as we found ourselves dealing with in making a performance in which 3 people in remote positions were carrying out different roles in the performance. So this is fun to watch, but I'm going to stop this now and go on to show you a quick excerpt of what it looked like when we were running live. I think this is it. Okay, and I'll fade him up in a second. This is Jonathan Nussbaum performing in his room. I'll fade him up now. And now what you see is the score is moving along as a function of how he's proceeding through the score. And as you can see, all he has for a set is drywall, but he's being lit. We have 4 lights on him that are being controlled by computer from across the continent from where he is, right? So I'll leave him, I'll give him some audio again. All right. So what you saw was, a series of lighting changes that were semi-automated, and the semi-automation is being derived from his own voice. So that just like that bird beak that I showed you before, there's the possibility that the possibility that remains really to be explored of a singer or a dancer or any other kind of a live artist creating an audio or video stream, that is to say performing, and an infrastructure around them that can be local or can be completely remote, which is taking the nuance and detail of the performance and throwing that back at the scene in the form of lighting and scenic and robotics and other kinds of changes that can therefore be intimately married to what the performer is doing. And that, I think, is all I really need to say. So what I'm going to do is pass things on to Martim, who will talk about the current project, which is Free Ice Cream.
All right. So our current project here, I'm going to preface it with a few previous projects that sort of inform how we got to freeicecream.net. By the way, I'm Martim. I'm a composer, percussionist, and multimedia artist based in Providence, Rhode Island, and New York. So this piece that you see here is called Add to Cart, and this was actually the first piece that h0t Club ever did together as a team. It's a multimedia theater piece that follows a Facebook user's journey as they try to be productive, but they keep getting sucked into loops of distraction and online shopping. Eventually, they just order a bunch of stuff off of Amazon, do an unboxing video after the UPS guy shows up playing a guitar. And then they are fed up with the whole thing, but they're still stuck in this loop of endless consumption online. So in this piece, we're just thinking about social media networks, online retail platforms, and just how we are all sort of entangled in their interconnections. That piece led to this following piece, which is called Hassle-Free Packaging. It's actually a section of Add to Cart that got taken out and turned into its own piece. This is based on unboxing videos as well. So the performer unboxes the materials for the piece and then plays it. So the instructions for the piece, all the instruments and percussion devices are in the box. So again, thinking of these private online spaces and how they encourage a certain kind of behavior that shapes the sort of interactions people have with each other while they're on these platforms. So that led to this piece, Music Cursor. And now we're thinking about what is the interaction between a person and their computer. Typically user interfaces or something like a mouse or a keyboard follows the kind of desktop metaphor for physical interactions. Whereas in this piece, we're rethinking that device and what would it be like if user interfaces were musical and sound-based. So the performer in this piece has to navigate YouTube, Wikipedia, and Google Maps using their instrument and clicking on things and performing various tasks. So turning the web into their playground, which then, this is the follow-up to that, which now we've distributed control over the cursor between two people. So we have a distributed interface that people need to work together to move the cursor to certain parts of the screen, clicking on these objects, which then moves them to the next part of the piece. So it's a little simplified game where you have to navigate your desktop in collaboration with someone else. So all of that is sort of how we get to freeicecream.net. So I'm just going to start this video and sort of talk over it. Let me do the intro first. Okay, so here we are. Freeicecream.net is a piece in which we are thinking about agency in a technological context and these network or distributed interactions again. So the project was initially conceived as an interactive installation environment where human and non-human agents are all sort of put into a scale model of the Internet of Things. And so there's various infrastructure and commercial objects in the space. We've got traffic cones, we've got cell phone towers, office plants, ice cream freezers, and each one of them is augmented through robotics and sensors and various cameras to be able to interact with each other and people in the space. And then a wireless network connects all of those objects to each other and to a larger sort of computer network that comprises the whole space as a kind of superorganism. So then when people enter the space, they influence the development of the piece by engaging with the various objects, as well as just being present in the camera feeds. So it's picking up whether somebody's in this corner of the room, what they're doing. And through the interaction of the human and non-human agents, the network moves through a series of different states, each prompted by changes in the lower level interactions of the network constituents. And so due to the pandemic, this first iteration had to be a web stream, but we're really looking forward to working with ThoughtWorks and CounterPulse and turning this into the next sort of phase of what the project was originally supposed to be. And open show is a big part of that, but also just having access to the space and resources is going to be really great. So thank you. And I think I'll pass it back to Kate.
Thanks. That is the wrap up for us. I mean, I think what we're really thrilled about is to be able to come into the space and see what we can make happen with this amazing team.
Thank you so much. Really excited to learn more. So I'm curious if any of the sort of partners, Ellen, Andy, or Kevin, have questions that they want to throw in here to get us kicked off. And then I welcome anybody who's listening. If you'd like to add a question to the chat bar, I can voice that for you and find a place for us to discuss it. And then also, as you all have been listening and learning about each other's projects, of course, if you have questions, please also just unmute and throw those in. We'll just do this popcorn style.
Yeah, I wanted to ask of Dilate something that has been my experience in networks, and I wondered how they did or did not deal with it, which was the issue of lag. I wondered if you could talk about that, both the video lag and I would assume the audio lag was less, but did that affect how you put your presentations together? Because latency is a big deal in certain performances.
Scott?
Sure. So the short answer, Ellen, is we embrace it. There's this limit. Right? the speed of light. So I think, and we're working with home level internet connections. Mine's pretty good. It's not great, certainly isn't gigabit. It's not even symmetrical. And I think, on a good day with one person, on the West Coast, there's still going to be like a 200 millisecond latency that we're working with. And then when there's 5 of us and a video, it stacks up. And so that has resulted, I think, in the resulting aesthetic, the sound of what we do, it tends to be immune to sounding wrong if things don't line up. And when they do, it's sort of satisfying and fulfilling. I'd say that the same thing also applies to the timbre, because a lot of the quality of the audio that first arrives at my location and that gets to the audience is compromised in certain ways. There's dropouts and glitches, and that has also become a kind of a part of the sound that we're working with. And then that also defines a lot of my work after in the post-production, which is eliminating those glitches and sounds.
Okay, and I actually had a question for Hot Club, which is not technical. And what I see you work with consistently is a very cutting, insightful social commentary, but I see you employ humor, a tremendous amount of humor. So I really would like to talk about that decision, because there's many decisions you can make in this, and why you are employing humor so much within your critical commentary.
Sure, I can start, and if anyone wants to jump in. I would say that what we found effective in bridging gaps, in bridging audiences of different disciplines together, in dealing with sort of both corporate hegemony and issues of control and surveillance, is to give folks a chance to have the agency or empower them to laugh, before being overwhelmed and shut down, which I think a lot of us are around some of these larger issues. And so the idea of laughter is an idea of vulnerability and release, and a stepping to something and allowing us to play with and be playful about something. And in doing that, hopefully allow us to consider more deeply how we are both susceptible and culpable in systems that can be oppressive. I think that the other thing is we really feel that joy, you've heard a million times the pandemic, joy is a radical act, but that the joy of us working together, and the reason I think we like working together, is a kindred sense of humor and being able to poke at these larger systems that can unmoor us, and take advantage of what it means to create small and critical sort of connections with one another and with different artists to start to unpack and unmoor those systems rather than being moored by them. So that's my frame of reference in terms of humor, and I appreciate that you think it's one that's funny.
I just want to add to that one short observation, the idea of disarmament. And so what you're actually doing is, in a very classical sense, you're disarming while you are actually arming. There's a sort of duplicity or dual level going on at the same time with that. And you're using humor as a device of disarmament in order to actually arm behind the humor. And so it's very multi-layered, those presentations, I found. I certainly want to give other people the opportunity to ask questions. I have more or to comment, but I'll hand it over next, and then I can come in with other observations.
I would like to actually ask one question of our club, which is the same question that Ellen asked to Dilate about lag and latency. I'd like to pose that question to you, please.
Miller, do you have any?
Well, I'm an expert at latency. I'm late to everything. Yes, latency matters only when you have loops, right? If you don't have a loop in the system, then the person who's at the receiving end of the information sees it when they see it, and they don't see the latency, right? So then the question is, to what extent can you, so then the question is, if you have a complicated network that does in fact have a lot of different loops in it, how do you think about how you get those things operating together in sync in such a way that everything that has to loop around gets there in the time that particular feedback system needs, right? So in one extreme, different project from the one I showed, it's a thing that I've been working on is just working with a percussionist in music that actually has a beat. So how do you do that? Well, what I do is 50 millisecond latency, and I simply lead the percussionist by 50 milliseconds in everything that I do. And I listen to what's coming out of the percussionist's computer using Quacktrip coming back. And so I hear everything that I do 50 milliseconds later. And so at that point, it's just like an organ player playing with a choir. You just have to hit the keys a little bit early because the pipes are 50 milliseconds away from you, right? When you're going from here to New York and back, well, then the latency is larger. But then on the other hand, what we're sending there and back is lighting changes, at least in the example that I showed you there. And a lighting change, you can lead it. But on the other hand, you can also, in other words, you can send the command out 200 milliseconds, say, in advance of when you want the lights to come up. When you know that, right? What you can't do is have the singer do something like that and have the lights change right on that moment, unless you actually lead the singer by that amount of time. In other words, you have to then be able to predict approximately when that action is going to happen in order to have your response happen at that same time after it has gone around whatever loop it had to go around, right? So basically, this is a thing that you design into the system, and you don't plan to do things that aren't possible. You constrain what you want to do to things that you can actually make work in the particular network that you find yourselves in, and the lower the latency that network is, the more you're going to be able to do. And thanks for the question. That's interesting. That's a thing that I think about a lot.
Yeah, it's been so amazing to get to know all of you in this kind of online format. And I'm also very excited that some of you have travel plans and coming to San Francisco and working in our space. And I'd just love to, see a raise of hands from all of you who are going to do that, and just kind of get a bit of a feeling of who we may get to meet in person. And some background on that is Andy and Ellen, you're over in New York and we've never met you either, so yeah, great.
Yeah, we might, or one of us might come over. We haven't decided that yet.
Mm-hmm. Cool, fantastic. Great, so some of you will get to see for sure. Great. Really looking forward to it. And yeah.
If I could volunteer a thing, I've never been in an art project that was being set up at the same time as the building itself was being set up. This is really kind of exciting, right? Because we can be thinking about the implications of the infrastructure of the building to what we are doing. And hopefully you can be watching us stub our toes against whatever the limitations happen to be and reacting accordingly. So as I see it, we get to be guinea pigs for your building project, but in a way that's actually really beneficial to both of us.
I'm really excited by that dimension as well. And certainly there's a lot already in place at CounterPulse, but a lot of flexibility that we have to we could move walls if we wanted to. So that's an exciting opportunity. I wanted to bring in the sort of non-human agency dimension that came up in the Hot Club presentation. It's something that I've been curious about, and just different types of networks and natural networks. Carole's video with the trees also brought this up for me, tree networks and the intelligence of different ecosystems as network environments, and wondering if those are a source of inspiration or foil or anything for either of your projects. Like, have you looked towards tree networks as a way of considering the video installations that you are making after projecting onto the trees, or also just the networked body environment? So the, human as diode and sensor as well as output, and just seeing if there's any link you're making between sort of natural physical material bodies, nature, trees, and the way that you're using the kind of technology that you're using.
If you don't mind, I would love to speak to the physical element, just 'cause that's more my land, maybe. But so I do really think what's really important, and I think Carole must have dropped off right now. She can speak to that more. But I think what's really important for us is we work very spatially. So in a sense, architecture is a very important part of what we do. And so what we've been exploring here is a digital architecture, right? So that's something it's just very interesting and intriguing, and there's so much more to be explored. But to actually have a physical space as well as a digital space and almost have multiple architecture almost on top of each other is something that I think is very exciting. And for me as a physical person, as well, even with voice, it's all physical. It's just the interaction that can be explored on these different levels is it ultimately for me comes down to, and I think for us as a group, comes down to a lot of listening. It's almost this like really deep listening space of listening to the architecture visually, sonically, physically. So there's a lot of, I feel like what ties together is this sense of a new form of listening, and how can we from there move on and create together. And I do find like that's how our ensemble, I think, also found each other in that sense, that we're just really good listeners to each other in that sense. And so that's something I think I'm at least excited about, to kind of start from that point of the physicality and the digital and those new architectural spaces of different, that kind of offer us different places of listening. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask Carole, but I don't know where she is anymore. So if anyone can step in, or anyone from not only Carole, but also from Hot Club. I want to also talk about video compression over the network, because that seems to be the rough thing to deal with. So if anyone wants to jump in and talk about that, because audio seems to be pretty easy to compress over a network, but video seems to have real limits. So please feel free to jump in.
I could jump in with that. That is for a live performance, a live feed over the internet. That's been a real issue for us, trying to be able to have the highest quality possible in any situation. And there's so many variables, between our individual internet connections, going into Scott's coming out to somebody else, and then you go to whatever the venue you're presenting on has for the capabilities. One of the ways that we've dealt with that is that we do local recordings of everything. So when we're creating a piece, we're doing local video recording and local sound recording, so that we can then put a piece together that was conceived during a live presentation, we can have a good quality product at the end by taking all the live feeds and then putting them together in post-production. Because then when we put that up on a site for viewing, it's the best possible quality.
So that's working with a sort of pre-recorded in a way that you re-record and send out. But what about?
That's not. No, we're creating the work real time, right?
Okay.
So the work is being created real time, but at the same time we're creating it, we're doing our own recording of it individually, so that we have a high quality version of it. So it's
I see.
Right? We're not. Okay. The piece is being, it's a version at the presentation.
I understand.
To get around that aspect of video compression and all the problems of, being on the internet, we record it so that we can put it together as what the best version of it we can possibly have after.
Sure. But I just want to say, does anyone else have another way?
If I could add something to what Jon just said, one thing that two things happen when you try to get video over a stream. One is it adds a lot of latency because all the video compression algorithms have to see several frames in order to do their work, right? And so everything that you get on the other end is somewhere between a half second and 10 seconds late, right? Mm-hmm. But one thing that you can do is you can monitor each other using a low resolution, low latency video connection. And as Jon says, be recording video at high resolution, but you can add to that also the possibility that you can make a high resolution transmission to an audience, as long as the feedback from the audience itself doesn't have to be instantaneous. You can actually be combining high resolution live streams with high latency out to what is essentially a video stream for consumption by others. The only thing is you can't consume it yourselves as performers until later.
So is that something either group will be working with live performance, or is that something?
Well, that's something we hope to be able to do in the new space. I mean, we're looking at getting better quality nodes so that instead of just our home internets. So we're going to have a really high quality node at CounterPulse. And then part of it is finding, the people that are remote to be in a place that have a much higher degree of connectivity to the central, to CounterPulse. I mean, having a gigabyte in and out gives us opportunities of quality that weren't available to us until this point.
Yeah, that's going to be very exciting for sure.
So another question I'd like to throw out there, because I'm going into this project very much wanting to examine this and seeing how we could maybe invigorate our thoughts about it. So it's really, the operative term would be hybridity. And I feel like the term hybrid is thrown out there to simply mean there'll be some people live and present in the same space and some people remote. And often it doesn't work very well. Like if you think of the classroom that tries to accommodate both or that kind of situation. And I feel like there's so much more room to think about hybridity and how live presence and live connection comes across. And at what point, where does that meet up? That's what interests me. Because I feel like just dealing with Zoom in this very flat way, it's very easy to tweak the situation where you can amplify what's coming across and just how much you're truly connecting with other people. And especially when you're interested in improvisation, where you have to be so attuned to what's happening as every second rolls out kind of thing. I feel like we don't ask enough of the technology often. And then sometimes you just change up the circumstances a little bit and everyone's delighted. They're like, oh my God, they really start feeling a level of communication on a more significant level. And so given the complexity of the times we're in, where we, this pandemic keeps morphing into God knows what, and this kind of thing, and we don't know, will anyone get to see what we're doing and all this kind of stuff. It's still about how can we still connect, how can we still connect as performers, how can we still connect with the people who are interested in this kind of work, and all of that. So I'm focusing on that, and that's what I'm hoping is going to keep us flexible and be okay with whatever form it takes, like however, like we do want to connect, but how we end up doing it, we'll have to see what the, world will accommodate, but like, can we widen that space, and can we invite more people into that space with us? Does that make sense? And Miller, I love the idea of performing like an organ player. That's going to add to my vocabulary as well. But anyway, this is something I'm thinking a lot about, like how can I get more out of each node and re-represent it in different ways and recombine them and still provide a space, as abstract as it might seem, or maybe it's very real. Maybe it's the space at CounterPulse where something happens as well, but we do feel each other's presence there. That's what I'm going for.
Well, I think that's a really great note to leave us on today, Carole. I share a lot of those desires myself in producing all the work that CounterPulse is making online, but moving back into our space as we speak. And I think this residency's core research is really to find answers to those questions, what this server can do to create those connections that you're talking about. So I'm so super thankful that all of you were able to be here today to talk about these projects. I'm really looking forward to the next 16 weeks as this all kicks off and having you on site and working virtually. Those of you who've tuned in, thank you for being here. We will be posting this panel online for anybody who wants to see it later. And we will also be sending out further public announcements about the residencies and about chances to get involved as artists, collaborators, and as audiences as the projects reveal themselves to us. So thank you again. Thank you to ThoughtWorks. Thank you, h0t Club. Thank you, Dilate Ensemble. I hope that you guys will tune into some other festival events. And in the meantime, take care.